When Ethan Marlo was born, his mother cried from relief and his father from exhaustion. The nurse wrapped him and said, "He's perfect." The Marlows smiled and nodded, and in their private ledger of hopes, they penciled a tiny note. "Try again." No one declared aloud, but time did the talking. Ethan's baby clothes were gray and practical. His birthdays were sheet cakes, half-frosted. The praise, when it came, was shaped like an apology. "You're a hard worker," his father, Dale, would say, as if it hurt to admit. His mother, Luann, had a laugh that bubbled for other people's children and a flat tone for him. "Put your plate in the sink." The house on Maple Ridge had 3 bedrooms and a 4th room that used to be an office. After the 3rd miscarriage, Luann had closed the office door. After the 4th, she left it open and painted the walls a hopeful yellow. After the 5th, the paint stayed on the roller. Ethan learned not to ask for things. He made his own peanut butter sandwiches, learned the precise way the washing machine liked to be fed, and by 10 he could change the oil in the family's Dennet Corolla. "He's handy," neighbors said, which is what people say when a child looks like a tool you can borrow. When Luann finally carried a 2nd child to term, the town delivered casseroles. The church ladies pressed pink blankets into Luann's arms. Dale stood taller in the grocery store. "A girl," he said to anyone who would listen. "We've got our girl." They named her Clara, a name that sounded like a bell rung for the right reasons. Clara had a nursery with a mural of birds and a ceiling mobile that whirred soft as breath. She had onesies with lace collars. Ethan had a new job, gravity. He held her while his parents napped. He rocked her through colic so Luann could take long baths that smelled like eucalyptus. He carried laundry baskets up the stairs and took the trash to the curb before dawn. When she cried, he moved. When she slept, he moved again, mopping, sweeping, putting away hope in labeled bins. "You're such a help," Luann would say to him without looking, the way people thank automatic doors. At school, Ethan sat in the front row and learned how to vanish. If the teacher asked a question, his hand rose only if no one else had a better shot. If there was a group project, he did the parts that didn't show. The counselor called him self-sufficient, a compliment that sounds noble until you translate it. He won't ask for what he needs. In 8th grade, he won the district science fair with a study on water runoff and cheap filtration. Dale hung the ribbon behind a calendar. "Good," he said, as if Ethan had replaced a light bulb. "Don't let it get to your head." When Clara started school, the house rotated around her. She was bright and funny and adored, and when she stumbled, the ground blamed the air. In 6th grade, she forgot her homework for a week straight. Luann called the teacher to discuss instructional style. In 8th, she failed algebra. Dale asked the principal whether the school had the right textbooks. "We'll hire a tutor," Luann announced, and then turned to Ethan. "You're good at math. You'll do it." He did. After dinner, after the dishes and the laundry and Clara's soccer cleats, he sat beside her and drew triangles until the pencil dulled. She chewed gum and hummed and kicked the chair leg. When she got a B on her retake, Luann kissed her forehead and said, "We're so proud." She didn't turn to Ethan. Praise was a thin rain that never reached him. Blame came like summer storms. When Clara forgot to feed the cat and the litter box turned sour, Luann wrinkled her nose and said, "Ethan, we talked about responsibilities." When Clara missed curfew, Dale stood in the doorway until the walls expected Ethan to explain what time meant. He learned to speak gently and precisely. He learned to be fairer to himself in his head than anyone was out loud. He learned how to tuck anger under a floorboard so it could not trip him. By junior year of high school, Ethan's GPA hovered near perfect. He joined debate not because he craved trophies, but because you could win with research and breath control. He discovered he loved the library's quiet outrage, the way facts insist without shouting. His English teacher, Ms. Pritchard, watched him argue a case about urban water policy and wrote a note in the margin of his paper. "You make complicated things listenable. Don't let the world convince you that's small." Colleges began to send letters. The Marlo mailbox fattens in spring. University of Michigan, Northwestern Brown. Ethan read them at the kitchen counter while Clara scrolled her phone. "Are you going to leave?" she asked once, as if he'd been hired for life. "I hope so," he said, and then felt unfaithful for telling a truth that harmed no one. He applied to Harvard because Ms. Pritchard insisted on a reach. Not because of the name, she said, but because they have money, and you deserve choices. The fee waiver went through. The essays cost him 3 nights' sleep and everything he had not said to the people who raised him. He wrote about filtration and fairness, and how chores taught him to see what others ignored. He did not write about Clara's mural or the way Luann smiled over him instead of at him. He did not write about Dale's consistency, lawn mowed, affection withheld, expectations like thumbtacks in the carpet. On a Tuesday in March, while he was in calculus, a thin envelope arrived. Luann slid a fingernail under the flap. The crest shone like teeth. Acceptance. Full scholarship. A deadline circled in bold. Respond by April 1st. She read it twice and felt something sharp and absurd. Jealousy at a piece of paper. She had already built a map where Ethan lived at home, attended the local college, and kept taking Clara to practice. In this map, dinner was always at 6. In this map, she never apologized. She placed the envelope in the junk drawer under tape and batteries. After school, Ethan made dinner. After dinner, he tutored Clara. After Clara went upstairs, he took out the trash and noticed the drawer open a crack. He closed it. He washed his hands. He closed his eyes and pictured the Harvard crest because he wanted to know what it felt like to imagine what he might have. 2 weeks later, Miss Pritchard asked, "Did you hear?" "Hear what?" "About your aid package. They copied me on the update." "Congratulations, Ethan." "My what?" She frowned. "Your acceptance. The dean wrote me a nice note about your essays." "Did you not?" She stopped. "Go home," she said quietly. "Check your mail." He ran. He didn't knock. The drawers stuck the way drawers do when they've learned to keep secrets. Inside, the Harvard envelope slept under a coil of twine. He read the letter in the garage because the house was suddenly a stage set and he did not trust the walls. His hands shook so badly the paper blurred. April 1st. The calendar in the kitchen had strawberries on it, and the squares were as neat as prison yards. Today was March 31st. He walked back into the kitchen and set the letter on the counter. Luann looked up from chopping onions. "What's that?" she asked. "You tell me," he said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. She swallowed. "I was going to talk to you tonight," she said. "We thought." It didn't seem practical with Clara's needs. "I didn't want you to get big ideas." "Big ideas," he repeated, as if the phrase belonged in a museum. Dale came in from the yard, wiping his hands. "Your mother and I discussed it," he said, the past tense a form of theft. "You're needed here. Community college is fine. It's cheaper. You could transfer later." "There's no tuition," Ethan said. "They're paying. All of it." He pointed to the sentence that had made him dizzy. Full cost of attendance. He imagined what that meant. A dorm that locked from the inside. A dining hall where no one asked him to serve. "It's far," Luann said. And Clara, "My life is not a detail in hers," he said, and then put a hand on the counter because he had never said words like that in this house. He called Miss Pritchard. She answered on the first ring. "Come back to the school," she said. "I'm here." In her classroom, they scanned and uploaded an overnight. She paid the FedEx fee when Dale refused to get out his wallet. "What kind of son are you?" Dale asked in the doorway. "Walking out on your family." "The kind who lived here," Ethan said. It did not feel like a barb. It felt like a record. That night, in a room that had never been entirely his, Ethan stared at the ceiling and recited a promise to himself. "I will step through every door I can open. I will not ask permission to be the person I already am." In the morning, he packed a small duffel with clothes and the science fair ribbon from behind the calendar. Luann stood in the hallway like a weather pattern. "You'll come home on weekends," she said, a statement disguised as a question. "I'll come home when I want to," he said, "and maybe that won't be often." "You're ungrateful," she said, as if gratitude were a bill he had failed to pay. He said nothing. He left. At the corner, Miss Pritchard waited in her car. She did not speak. She handed him a travel mug of coffee and drove him to the bus station. On the bus, he cried, quick, quiet, the way men on buses cry. He let himself have it all at once, so it would not leak into everything else. When the tremor passed, he pressed his palm to the window and watched the town tilt and shrink. Harvard was red brick and urgency. It was also the first place in Ethan's life that matched his speed. He discovered he did not have to work to be small. He could work to be true. He chose classes the way he had once chosen chores, everything that needed doing. Economics because the world kept insisting that money was destiny. Philosophy because he wanted words that could hold what happened in kitchens. Statistics because reality likes numbers. Urban studies because maps lie less than people. He found friends who were gentle with their ambition. Sierra from Dublin, who used to stop mid-sentence to look up an etymology. Kenji from Seattle, who ran on the river at dawn and brought Ethan along until 6 a.m. Felt like a promise. Maya from Queens, who swore like a dock worker and read poetry like prayer. He also found hunger that was not physical. In seminars, when someone called him gifted, he felt both seen and cornered. When a professor wrote, brilliant, on a paper, he felt like a houseplant under a heat lamp. He learned to turn praise into fuel, not fire. On Parents' Weekend freshman year, he did his laundry on Friday and stayed in his room on Saturday. When Clara texted a selfie from the student center, Luann and Dale behind her holding 2 campus maps like a happy brochure, he stared until the phone locked itself. He did not go out. He did not reply. On Sunday, he ran with Kenji and told him the truth in pieces. "Do you miss them?" Kenji asked. "Missing is a word for something that used to exist," Ethan said. "I think what I have is something else." Kenji nodded like a person who knew how to listen to things that refused to be named. "Then keep going," he said. "Build what you didn't have." Ethan built a schedule and a self. He took the jobs the work-study office offered, library aide, peer tutor, and learned how to keep the lights on with exactly the money there was. He learned you can save, even on a meal plan, if you learn where soup lives. Sophomore year, he found a mentor in Professor Haynes, who studied cities as if they were conversations. "You write like you're laying tile," Haynes said after Ethan turned in a paper about bus routes and fairness. "Measured, layered, aligned. Who taught you to be so careful?" "My house," Ethan said, surprised by how quickly the answer appeared. "And the places it didn't hurt to be wrong." Haynes nodded. "Keep your care," he said. "Care doesn't keep you small. It keeps you honest." Ethan worked in a clinic that helped tenants fight illegal evictions. He learned to translate between the language of landlords and the language of mothers who worked 2 jobs and still apologize for their shoes. He was good at it. The listening, the maps, the patience. He slept badly during trials and deeply after verdicts. By senior spring, he had a job offer from a policy lab and a list of graduate programs that had said yes. He bought a tie that made him look like someone you'd trust with bridges. He sent Ms. Pritchard a copy of his thesis. He did not send anything to Maple Ridge. Graduation morning, the sky was deliriously blue. Maya fastened Ethan's hood and kissed his cheek like family. When the dean said his name, he walked across the stage with his hands open, fingers loose. Honors. Applause he did not quite believe belonged to him. He held it anyway. Afterward, he stood under a sycamore with his friends and took pictures that looked like proof. Later that night, he sat alone on the steps of the library and let himself think of Luann's junk drawer, of the envelope under twine. He examined the bruise again. It was smaller. It would always be there. It no longer told him where to stand. The years after college arranged themselves like scaffolding and then a home. Ethan moved to Boston for graduate school, then to D.C. for a fellowship. He fell in love with Layla, a pediatrician who believed adults could be repaired with the same stubborn gentleness she used on 6-year-olds. They married in a small ceremony in a botanical garden. Ms. Pritchard cried louder than anyone and didn't apologize. Their son, Theo, arrived with a scream that sounded like a verdict overturned. Ethan held him and made a private litany. "I will not teach you to be small to stay safe. I will not make your goodness a utility. I will not punish you for other people's weather." He and Layla bought a narrow house with stairs that encouraged strong calves and arguments in motion. The living room had a window seat. The kitchen had a table that begged to be used for homework and pastry. On the wall, they hung a map of the city and 2 photos. Ethan at graduation, Layla in her white coat holding a stethoscope like a promise. Ethan's work took shape. He led a team at a transportation nonprofit that convinced a stubborn city council to move bus lanes from pilot to permanent. He taught a seminar on equity and infrastructure and learned to enjoy office hours, where students came to practice hope. He called Clara every few months. Their conversations were a mixture of weather and almost truth. She studied cosmetology and managed a salon. She dated a man named Owen who owned a motorcycle and did not own a helmet. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked once. "I'm trying," Clara said. "You?" "Most days," he said. "That feels like a miracle." He did not speak to Luann or Dale. They did not call him. When Clara sent a photo of the Maple Ridge house after a hailstorm, he noticed the roof had been patched in 3 different colors. He felt the familiar tug, duty dressed as inevitability. He put his phone face down until the tug passed. On Theo's 4th birthday, he watched his son blow out candles and felt a wave of heat that was not the oven. He was proud and terrified and present. He was a father with a small boy and a whole life between him and a junk drawer. The call came on a Wednesday in late autumn, when the sky turned stainless and the trees showed their bones. Ethan was on the floor building a train village with Theo. The phone buzzed with Clara's name. He answered with a smile that tightened as she spoke. Her voice was barely holding together. "Ethan," she said, "can you talk?" "I can." He stood, nodded to Theo, mouthed bathroom to Layla, and closed the door. "Things are bad," Clara said. I don't know how to say it right. Mom's sick. Real sick. We didn't catch it early. The house, we're behind. Owen left. I shouldn't have. None of that matters. Ethan, I need help." "How sick?" he asked, and the steady voice that had carried tenants through courtrooms returned to him like a jacket he kept in the hall closet. "Chemo. They say it could work, but she needs meds now. The copays are, we can't. And the house. 3 months late. They sent a notice. I've been paying what I can, but have Mom and Dad asked me to help?" Ethan asked, not to be cruel, but to understand the terrain. "No. They told me not to call you. Dad said, you know how he is. Pride and a shovel, even when he's digging a well." "Why did you call?" "Because I remember," Clara said, and her voice broke on the word. "I remember you teaching me fractions at the table. I remember you never letting me believe I was dumb, even when I acted like it. I remember you leaving with a backpack and that look on your face like you were walking out of skin. I was a kid. I was mean sometimes. I'm sorry. And Mom, she's different, Ethan. She's scared. I'm scared." He sat on the closed toilet lid and looked at the tile he and Layla had chosen for its serene, underwater blue. He had cut the edges himself and bled once and laughed about it later. He felt the old house return for a second with all its drafts and scripts. He did not invite it in. "Okay," he said. "Here's what I can do." "I'm not asking for, I know," he said. "I'm telling you." He outlined a plan the way he always did. He would cover the upcoming copays and 6 months of the specific meds the oncologist prescribed. He would not pay the mortgage. He would fund a visit from a social worker to set up whatever assistance programs Luann qualified for. He would arrange for a pro bono financial counselor to lay out the options: sale, refinance, payment plan. He would call the hospital billing office and negotiate, because even hospitals behave differently when they realize someone knows the names of their forms. "And the house?" Clara asked again, barely a whisper. "I won't carry it," he said. "I won't become a floor. That's not help. That's a trap." She was quiet for a long time. "I figured," she said finally. "I had to ask. I guess I wanted you to be the kind of person who—" He interrupted gently. "Clara, I am the kind of person who helps. I'm also the kind of person who knows the cost of being eaten alive. I can pay for health. I can't buy the past. I can't buy their lesson for them. They have to get it another way. And me, you," he said, "I will help. With rides, with sitting in waiting rooms, with spreadsheets. With being a person on the other end of the phone who believes you can do hard things without making yourself small. But I won't move back into that house. Not with my body. Not with my bank account." She exhaled a sob he had never heard from her. "Okay," she said. "Okay." After he hung up, he sat on the bathroom floor and let his back hit the wall. Layla knocked once and came in and sat beside him. He told her everything. She didn't tell him what to do. She knew he already knew. "Do the kind thing that doesn't burn you," she said. "And when you can't tell the difference, ask me." He kissed her palm, stood, and made the calls. The hospital billing office treated him like a person who was both inconvenient and necessary. He wrote down names. He asked to escalate. He used phrases like financial hardship policy and prompt pay discount. He called the oncologist's office and asked about generics and foundations. He found an assistance program that would cover one chemo drug at 80% for 6 months. He emailed the link to Clara with an application pre-filled. He called the mortgage servicer and asked hypothetical questions and realized that if he entered the arena, he would not be able to leave without a bruise he could not explain to Theo. He forwarded a contact at a nonprofit that helped families negotiate sale timelines and relocation assistance. He texted Clara, "You don't have to lose everything to learn." He wired money for the copays to Clara's account, not to Luann's, and sent a second amount to the pharmacy rather than anyone's purse. He made a spreadsheet with tabs labeled meds, rides, appointments, legal. He invited Clara, not Dale, to the document. 2 days later, Luann called from an unfamiliar number. He let go to voicemail. Then he listened. "Ethan," she said. Her voice sounded like a room after furniture has been moved, echoing out of place. "Clara told me. I don't know how to say thank you. I didn't think, well, I thought a lot of things that weren't right. I'm sorry. Your father, he's your father. He'll come around in his way. I would like, if you'd let me, to see you, or talk, or something. If you don't, I understand. I'm proud of you." I never said it because I didn't know how without admitting we were wrong. We were wrong. I'm sorry. He sat very still while the words arranged themselves in him. He did not feel triumphant. He felt like someone who had been given a weather report that finally matched the sky. He called her back, but he did not step into the old choreography. He set a timer in his head and kept the call under 10 minutes. He talked about the treatment plan, about Clara's strength, about specific days he could drive. He did not talk about Harvard. He did not talk about drawers. He said, at the end, "I'm glad you're getting care." He meant it. When he hung up, Theo ran in and wrapped himself around Ethan's leg. "Trains?" Theo asked. "Always," Ethan said, and lifted him high enough to forget the floor. Sickness is a job that doesn't pay. Ethan took days off to drive Luann to chemo. He brought ginger candies and blankets that felt like summer. He brought silence, the good kind. He learned the nurses' names. He learned which recliner didn't squeak. He watched Luann sleep with her mouth open and her hands curled into children's fists. Once, waking, she reached for his hand without looking. "You were a good baby," she said, her voice a whisper that assumed forgiveness. "You didn't need much." He didn't correct her. He wasn't there to collect debt. He was there to make sure the poison did what it was supposed to do and nothing else. Clara did the bulk of the work because she had the proximity and because she needed to be good at something no one could take from her. She managed Luann's pills, kept track of insurance EOBs like a second language, learned to argue politely with pharmacists and firmly with uncles who offered advice instead of help. Dale spent afternoons in the yard raking leaves that fell while he raked. He fixed things that didn't need fixing and let the big things stand. He said little. When he did speak, it was in the second person plural, as if the house and the marriage were a we that might forgive him through grammar. After a month of this, Ethan drove home and sat in the car for 10 minutes before going in. Layla met him at the door with a glass of water and a plate of apples. He ate one slice and felt like a human again. "Does helping make you feel better?" she asked. "It makes me feel accurate," he said. Better is a different machine. He checked Theo's homework and read 3 stories and kissed his son's forehead like a handshake with the future. He slept like a person who trusts his own boundaries. Spring arrived with birds and bills. The mortgage could not be saved. There was no equity to refinance, and a payment plan would have been a prayer against math. With the counselor's help, Clara convinced Luann to list the house. Dale agreed with a quiet that looked like surrender and felt like relief. They found a buyer who liked the crooked backyard and the trees that shed in honest ways. The closing covered the arrears and left enough for a small apartment near the clinic. Luann cried, walking from room to room, the way ghosts cry when they realize they have been haunting themselves. The day the moving truck came, Ethan lifted boxes and ignored the part of his body that remembered every step in this house. Clara found the junk drawer. She held up a coil of twine. "He's forgiving," she said, trying to make a joke and failing. Ethan took the drawer and dumped it into a box without ceremony. There's no ritual for leaving a place that taught you not to expect confetti. Luann pulled him aside before he left. "I wanted to say it to your face," she said. "I'm sorry for what I did. For what we did." He nodded. "Thank you," he said. "I accept that." "I don't expect," she began. "I know," he said. "And I'm not offering what you think. I'll be here for appointments. I'll make sure you have what you need to be well. But I can't be your boy again in the way that word meant in this house. I have a boy of my own now. I belong to him, to my wife, to the life I built." Luann's eyes filled. "You always belonged to yourself, Ethan," she said. "We were the ones who pretended otherwise." Dale approached then, hands in pockets like a boy caught at the fence. "Thank you," he said, the words sounding as if he'd borrowed them. "For the medicine. For everything." "You're welcome," Ethan said. He meant that too. A year later, Luann's scans showed remission. She sent Ethan a photo of a cake Clara had baked. No evidence of disease, piped in shaky icing. He stared at it, as if it were a foreign alphabet. He texted back a string of confetti emojis that made Theo laugh. Clara moved into a better apartment with a window that made plants brave. She took night classes in accounting because she had learned she liked numbers when they told the truth. She called Ethan on Tuesdays to argue about budgeting like people who trust each other do. Dale got a job at the hardware store. He learned the names of tools the way you learn the names of birds when you finally listen. He never explained himself to Ethan because there is no verb for that doesn't undo something else. Ethan watched Theo learn letters and then words and then the kind of questions that make adults put down their phones. "Why are some people mean to the people they love?" Theo asked once. "Because sometimes love is a habit before it's a choice," Ethan said. "And sometimes people forget to choose." "Will you forget?" "I won't," Ethan said. "But if I act like I did, you tell me." Out loud. Theo thought about it. "Okay," he said. Out loud. On a Friday in June, Ethan and Layla hosted a dinner in their narrow house for friends who had become family. Miss Pritchard came in a blue dress the color of forgiven sky. Kenji brought a pie that surprised itself by being good. Maya read a poem in the kitchen while the rice steamed. After dessert, Miss Pritchard stood and clinked her glass with a spoon that had stirred 3 generations of soups. To Ethan, she said, who knows the difference between help and sacrifice, and who taught his teacher to be braver about both. He tried to make a joke and couldn't. He raised his glass and said, "To doors, the ones we walk through, the ones we close, the ones we build for people who never had them." In late summer, Ethan took Theo to a park with a carousel. While Theo rode a tiger that had never seen a savanna, Ethan's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He answered because life had taught him both caution and curiosity. "Mr. Marlo," a voice said. "This is Angela from St. Luke's. I'm a social worker. I've been working with your mother. She asked me to call." He looked up at the carousel. Theo waved at him with 2 hands and a grin that looked like a solved equation. "Is she all right?" "She's fine," Angela said. "She wanted me to tell you. Well, she wrote it down because she didn't want to say it and cry in my office. She said, 'Tell him I'm proud. Tell him he was always the best part of me, even when I didn't know how to show it. Tell him I know the timing is late, but I wanted to send the letter anyway.'" Ethan exhaled a laugh that hurt. "Thank you," he said. "That's thank you." Later that night, he told Layla. She held him while he tried to decide whether words can undo time. They can't. They can make time livable. He wrote Lewin a note. "Thank you for telling the truth. I'm glad you're well. I'm glad I am, too." He mailed it. He did not wait for the thud in the box. He went to read a book to his son. On a cold morning in November, the heat in Clara's building went out. The landlord promised and then delayed. Clara texted Ethan a photo of her breath. He sent her a link to a tenant's rights page and the draft of a demand letter. He also sent her a delivery of space heaters and a Target gift card and a reminder to call the city inspector if the temperature dipped again. "You're good at this," she wrote. "I had practice," he wrote back. He visited for the weekend and fixed the window that had been pretending to shut. He bought groceries, but not a new couch. He installed a carbon monoxide detector, but not a sense of fate. He hugged Clara and left with the feeling that help can be small and still be true. On the way home, he stopped by the apartment where Luann and Dale live now, 2 floors up from Quiet. He brought a bag of oranges and a list of their next appointments printed in big type. He didn't stay for coffee. He didn't give explanations. He left before anyone forgot what this arrangement was, the bare minimum that dignity allows. Years wrote themselves. Theo lost his first tooth and looked unjustly proud. Layla planted tomatoes and learned to trust the soil in a city that sold itself as steel. Ethan kept going to work, kept teaching students to measure what they wanted to change, kept coming home in time to be the person Theo expected. Sometimes in the night, when the house had the specific quiet of 2 people who trust each other sleeping, he'd wake and think of that drawer. He didn't dwell anymore. He took the memory out like you take out a splinter to remind yourself where not to step. The last time he spoke to Dale was on a Sunday where the sky refused to choose a color. Dale said, "We didn't do right by you." Ethan said, "I know." Dale said, "I'm sorry." Ethan said, "Thank you." They stood in that short exchange like men on either side of a narrow river. Neither tried to build a bridge that would collapse under the weight of too much freight. They waved. They went home. Clara came to visit on a weekend in May. She brought a plant and bad coffee and good jokes. She watched Ethan and Theo build a fort and cried when Theo handed her a blue crayon like a baton in a race she didn't know she'd been running. "I was awful to you," she said later on the porch. "Not always, but enough." "You were a kid in a script," he said. "You didn't write it. You read your lines." "I ad-libbed," she said, wincing. He smiled. "We're good," he said. And he meant that, too. When she left, she tucked a note under the sugar canister. "Thank you for not being bitter," it said. He added it to a drawer that did not hide. Next to Theo's tooth and a ticket stub from the day he and Layla had decided to ask strangers to witness a promise. The last time Ethan saw the house on Maple Ridge, it had already forgotten him. The new owners had painted the door the color of a mailbox and planted lilacs with a mower always choked. He drove by on his way out of town after clinic training, not because he wanted to, but because some places deserve a goodbye you can live with. He parked across the street and told Theo a story about a boy who lived in a house that taught him to find a light switch without bumping into tables. Theo listened like a juror. "Did he find it?" he asked. "He did," Ethan said. "He found lots of them." "Did he share?" "When he could," Ethan said. They drove away. The rearview mirror made the house smaller with every block. That night, after Theo fell asleep, Ethan took out a sheet of paper and wrote what he wished someone had written the day he was born. "You are not a project. You are a person. You owe no one your smallness. The world may reward you for being useful. Reward yourself for being whole. If someone hides your letter, write your own. If someone locks a door, grow the key." He folded the paper and put it in Theo's keepsake box, not because his son would need it, but because he wanted the box to know what kind of house it was living in. Clara sat with Luann on a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight making the apartment look as if it had forgiven itself. Luann picked at the edge of a magazine and said, "Do you think it's too late?" "For what?" Clara asked. "To be the kind of mother he should have had. To be the kind of woman I told myself I was." Clara looked at the wall where they'd hung new photos, Theo laughing, Ethan in a suit, a shot of the 3 of them holding coffee cups on a stoop. "It's late," Clara said. "But not for that. That's not for him. That's for you." Luann nodded, small. "I wish I knew then what I know now." "So do a lot of people," Clara said softly. "Do something with the knowing." Across town, Dale stood in the hardware store showing a young man the difference between a Phillips and a flathead. "The wrong tool makes the right job hard," he said. He hurt himself. He swallowed. He rang up the sale and threw in a handful of screws because he could. Ethan, at home, tucked Theo into bed and turned off the light and stood for a moment in the doorway, the way fathers do when they are counting the seconds of a life that is not their own. Layla slipped her hand into his. "You're all right?" she asked. "I am," he said, surprised by the ease. "I'm not bitter." "That's not nothing," she said. "It's a lot," he said. They went downstairs to the kitchen that had become a temple for regular days. On the fridge was a list of groceries, and beneath it a photo of a boy in a cap and gown. On the counter lay a single envelope addressed in Clara's careful script. Inside was a note. I found this in Mom's things. It's the Harvard letter. I thought you should have it. Not because you need proof, but because paper should learn to tell the truth eventually. I love you. See, Ethan unfolded the old acceptance, the crest like a smile that finally made sense. He didn't feel the sting he expected. He felt a quiet click, like a door shutting on a room that didn't need visiting anymore. He put the letter in the drawer with the notes that it kept, the ones he chose. Then he washed the dishes and set the coffee for morning and went to bed in a house where the only chore that mattered was the daily work of staying kind.